For NYUp.com, I am Matt Parrino, and the Buffalo Bills are taking on the Tennessee Titans today. And to my left, my right, I don't know, it depends on where you're sitting. That's Erik Bacharach from the Tennessean. Erik, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely, Matt. Happy to be on.
Awesome. So we got a big game season kind of on the line for the Bills this week. 1-3 to start the season, and a pretty big regression last week against the Green Bay Packers. The offense struggled in a 22-0 shutout. Josh Allen, behind his offensive line, was sacked 7 times. Again, for the 4th straight game, no real semblance of a running game as that continues to be a trend. The team will likely rely on its defense as it has all season this week against Marcus Mariota. Erik, if you could, tell us a little bit about that big win for the Titans last week.
Yeah, obviously, a huge win for the Titans. Overtime win. Marcus Mariota threw for 344 yards after, we weren't exactly sure what he was capable of doing. He's dealing with an elbow injury that's kind of left his right throwing hand with numbing and just sort of this tingling feeling in his right hand. But he throws for 344 yards, kind of leads a drive late in the game for the Titans to get a touchdown. And then in overtime, a couple of just gutsy calls by Mike Vrabel. They converted on 3 fourth-down conversions on their overtime drive, and Marcus Mariota found Corey Davis in the end zone for a touchdown that won the game. Corey Davis had 161 receiving yards. So, just a thrilling win for the Titans over the, reigning Super Bowl champs. And that's 3 games in a row now that they've won by exactly 3 points against teams that they were underdogs to. So, the Titans are obviously surging right now.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, a lot of national love for the Titans at 3-1. I've been listening to some national guys and talking about, what are the expectations now in Tennessee. And I wanted to ask you, now that we have you here, and Bills fans will be interested in this because obviously they play this week, but how good is this team? Obviously, Mike Vrabel, a very hot name in, coming up in the coaching ranks. Marcus Mariota, a guy that, we'll talk about in a minute, but how good is this team, and where do their strengths lie?
Yeah, it's a good question, and to be honest, it's a question that we, the Titans media have been trying to answer now for a couple weeks, just because, the Titans started this season with a bunch of fluky games. The first one was a 7-hour, 8-minute sort of marathon against the Dolphins, which they lost. At which point we're kind of looking and thinking this team with the schedule they had, the last 2 weeks they played the Jaguars, who many have as a Super Bowl contender, and the Eagles, the reigning Super Bowl champs. And in week 2 they played the Texans, a divisional opponent who, a lot of people thought a lot of coming into the season as well. After that week 1 loss, we thought this could be an 0-4 team. That's kind of the way or the tone around the Titans, at least from the media's perspective, heading into week 2. And then all of a sudden they sort of flip a switch, and, I think Mike Vrabel has sort of emerged as this coach of the year type candidate, just with what he's been able to do with a limited roster. They had a bunch of injuries early in the season. They're dealing with the injury to Jack Conklin, the right tackle, all-pro right tackle. Obviously, as I mentioned, Mariota got hurt in that season opener. He had to miss the second game, was limited in week 3, and then obviously was still dealing with the injury last week, but didn't appear all that limited. So they've kind of had to fight their way through injuries just to get to this point. As far as strengths right now, coaching is definitely a big one. Just from what we've seen from Mike Vrabel. Special teams, another sort of consistent thing that the Titans are getting a lot out of. Ryan Suckup is 9 of 10 on field goals. Brett Kern keeps getting it done as a punter, and the Titans have a couple of touchdowns on special teams as well. The defense is playing really well. I think they're allowing around 17 points a game, which is top 10 in the NFL. And if they could get anything from their offense, which they did last week from Mariota, that they could be a really good team. And I think nationally, I think the jury's still out on what the Titans are. I've seen a bunch of sort of power rankings this week where the Titans are still outside the top 10, despite having knocked off the reigning Super Bowl champs and the Jaguars. A team that a lot of people have going far. So I think as the Titans continue to build and stack these wins, that's going to continue to come, because right now they've sort of earned that spot, I think, in the top 10 in power rankings.
Mm-hmm. Talked about it a little bit, at the start here. The big struggle right now for this team is coming off of last week, the quarterback play, but the ability to protect Josh Allen. I mean, you have a wide receiver group that, is underperforming even for its low expectations going into the season. Kelvin Benjamin had one catch last week after, a week or two prior, adamantly proclaiming that he is the number one receiver on this team, but he's just not getting it done. So you look at the Tennessee defense last week against Carson Wentz, who threw for 300 yards, but they did get to him a few times. And I think I heard it was Mike Lombardi talking about it, how he was getting hit all game long. So you have that expectation to go into this game that it's going to be tough to keep Josh Allen standing because of everything that's happened this year so far. What is it that the Titans are doing so well on the defensive side of the ball that's allowing them to get to the quarterback?
Yeah, well, as you alluded to, the pass rush has been really good. I think they sacked Wentz something like 3 times and had a bunch of I think it was 4 times actually, and had close to 10 or 11 quarterback hurries. The defensive coordinator DMPs in his first year here has been really good at sort of just about being unpredictable with what he brings. Malcolm Butler, a cornerback, had a sack last week on a cornerback blitz. There's just been some tricky things that they've been using to sort of disguise what they're about to do and sort of effectively execute it. And the questions going into this year were never really all that much about defense. We kind of knew what the defense was going to be going into the year. We thought this was going to be one of the best secondaries in the NFL. And then up front, you've got Jarrell Casey, who's probably put himself in the MVP conversation, honestly. Top 15 for that award, just with how he's playing. He's got 3 sacks, and every single week it seems like he's doing something disruptive back there. And then you've got a couple of linebackers that are really doing a good job of getting to the quarterback. One that stands out from last week is rookie Howard Landry, second round pick out of Boston College, who had a big time strip sack late in that game last week that sort of helped just turn the momentum of that game, which the Titans recovered. And like I said, he's a rookie, but just the way he's sort of able to bend around the edge has really impressed some people here, and has made some people think that they got a steal in the second round with getting him there. So the Titans so far this year have been good on the pass rush. They're still allowing probably too many yards per carry. So it's not by any means a flawless defense, but absolutely, I think a big key for them is to be making Josh Allen uncomfortable this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Going back and watching the condensed version of the game last week, it seemed like Jay Ajayi did have some nice runs in that game. An area that the Bills have struggled, without a doubt, has been their running game, and we'll get to that at the end here. But Marcus Mariota is an interesting, case study if you're a Bills fan, because you have a young quarterback like Josh Allen, a guy with some athleticism, a la Marcus Mariota, a big arm, a guy that the potential is super high. But I remember early in Marcus's career, after he had that really solid rookie year, there was some regression, right? I mean, there was some concerns about how good can he be. So if you could, and I know this is your first year on the beat, like we talked about before the show, but what's that narrative like around the team right now in terms of his progression? And there is some hope if things maybe don't start as perfectly as fans hope.
Yeah, absolutely. With Marcus, I think his first 2 years in the league, he was kind of consistently trending upward. People here felt really good about him as their franchise quarterback, and then last year, he takes a step back. He threw 13 touchdowns versus 15 interceptions a season ago, and was obviously able to lead them to a playoff win, which is huge. But the overall kind of just resume from a year ago wasn't all that striking, and was definitely viewed as a step back for him. So this was always going to be a crucial year for him, his 4th season in the league. And it's kind of been difficult to size up, these first 4 games again, just because he got hurt early. That's been another thing with him, is that, can he stay healthy for an entire year? But just what we saw last week, I think it's kind of a reassuring thing just to see him go off as he did, throw for close to 350 yards, and Again, this was a week when the Titans rushing game ran for probably, I think it was like maybe 60 or 70 yards, but honestly, Marcus had 46 of those rushing yards. So, it was always going to be on him against a defense like the Eagles that are so good stopping the run. And he stepped up and he was able to get it done. And up until that point, I think, people were still kind of uneasy about him this year, specifically. Although last week against the Jaguars or the week before, he was limited with what he could do, but he was still able to help them to a win. So it's kind of been in this up and down thing with Marcus, and right now he's trending up, but he's really has to keep that going, especially coming off last year, when again, I think the consensus was he took a step back and kind of put himself in a position where, he had some things to prove in year 4.
Mm-hmm. This is the type of game that will likely define the Bills' season. I mean, things aren't looking good, but going at 0-2, giving up 78 points, heading into that shocking Minnesota upset, I don't think anybody thought that this was a playoff caliber team. But at 1-3, playing a team like the Titans at home, if you're not able to get this win, you go on the road for 2, Indianapolis and Houston. And then you got New England coming back home on Monday night. If you lose this game, you could very well be 1-7 to start the season. So very, very important game for the Bills. I mean, I think that this will be their last gap. Sean McDermott spoke a lot about it this week, that he's doubling down on everything that he's been teaching these guys. He's got a young roster. He's hoping to kind of stress the fundamentals, get back to just doing things the right way. And I think that, one thing that stood out to me about the Titans, looking at, their stats in this season, they don't get penalized a lot and they don't turn the ball over. And that's something that, you have to do to win on the road. So is that something where you've noticed that they're, a fundamentally sound team?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the coaching, as I said. And again, the jury was very much still out after that first game against the Dolphins, which was obviously by all accounts, a super fluky game. There was like 4 hours of weather delays in that game. And it was hard to size them up at that point. I don't think anybody then was singing Mike Vrabel's praises. That was a game they should have won. But in the game since, they've done all of those things, right? All of sort of the things you need to do, fundamentals wise, being smart, not a lot of dumb penalties, not a lot of penalties in general. And then they haven't turned the ball over, especially, in critical situations. Marcus Mariota threw 1 interception last week. But other than that, it was a flawless performance from him. But that's been the key, or one of the big keys, in just sort of upsetting a couple of these teams the past 2 weeks, is just not turning the ball over, being efficient, being effective. And if it's not a punt, it's a field goal, it's a touchdown. They're just not turning it over, especially in crunch time and when they need it. And that's been able to keep them close and down the stretch win these ball games.
Mm-hmm. All right, before I let you get out of here, let's rapid fire. We're gonna go through our keys to the game. I'll start it off with my first one, then we'll go you back and forth. I think the Bills have to get their running game going. I mean, this has been the strong point of this offense, this team, since LaShawn McCoy was traded to the Bills 3 years ago from the Philadelphia Eagles, and he has been invisible. And however you have to do it, I mean, a lot's been made about Brian Daboll and this new creative offensive scheme that he's brought in here, and you have to get the ball in LaShawn McCoy's hands. I saw a lot in the preseason training camp, lining him out, even as, at the wide receiver spot, all the way at the edge, trying to get him the ball maybe on some screens. Very, very important in this game. Jay Ajayi had some success last week, and I think you have to have success if you're LaShawn McCoy for the Bills to be successful this week.
Yeah, I think my first key is kind of something obvious, but something that the Titans can't take for granted, and that's the Bills. Not to overlook this game. The phrase "trap game" has been thrown around a bunch in the locker room this week. Just with media asking questions to the players, and I think the way this coaching staff has kind of just gotten itself in with this locker room, and right now has the confidence of these players. I don't see that happening, but I think we saw it week 2 when or I guess it was week 3 when the Bills knocked off the Minnesota Vikings. There's no layups in the NFL. To go on the road and get a win is a big deal every single time. So the Titans can't overlook the Bills, despite how ineffective they've been offensively. I think the defense could pose some problems for them. So they've got to go in there and not take this team lightly.
Mm-hmm. Number 2 for me is I think they have to get back to what they did in that Minnesota game and game plan to protect Josh Allen. And I don't just mean obviously from an offensive line perspective, but I mean in the play calling itself. I mean, they were utilizing a lot of short screen passes, getting the ball out of Josh Allen's hands quickly as he develops, and he's seen a lot of these NFL defenses for the first time coming from Wyoming. It could be a little overwhelming. He's making progress. He sounded confident on Wednesday, but if you're Brian Dable and Sean McDermott, you have to put your rookie quarterback who you've inserted early this season when a lot of experts said that he should probably sit out a la Patrick Mahomes and watch for a while. If you're going to put him out there and put him in these situations against tough defenses, you got to protect him. Last week, Zach Ertz had a ton of success from Carson Wentz over the middle of the field. Charles Clay has to get involved in this offense this week with Josh Allen. It'll be interesting to watch. Number 3 for you, 2 for you.
Yeah, it's probably get somebody going on offense other than Corey Davis. As I mentioned earlier, Corey Davis had 9 catches for 161 yards last week, both career highs, and then not to mention the game-winning touchdown. But other than him, there wasn't a whole lot going offensively for the Titans. Taywan Taylor had a nice game. Wide receiver had 7 catches. Deion Lewis, I think, caught all 9 of his targets. But the running game really didn't get much going, and the Titans knew it was going to be an uphill battle against the Eagles in that regard. I think Derrick Henry had 8 rushes for 24 yards, and Deion Lewis didn't get any positive yardage on his 4 carries. So if they could get something going in the running game, that would obviously help open up the pass, and that's going to be something that's crucial going forward. This has been probably 4 weeks now where we've kind of been waiting for Derrick Henry to erupt. Is this going to be the week? Maybe. Going into last week, I didn't think it was going to come against the Eagles, but I think obviously it's more likely to come this week. But they've got to get something going on the ground. And then if another receiver could step up as well, which is sort of the emergence of Corey Davis, you would have to think that teams are going to start paying much more attention to him now after that breakout game. So the Titans are looking for a couple more guys to step up offensively.
Mm-hmm. Number 3 for me, I'm going to say that or expect that pass rush is going to be there in this game, keeping Marcus Mariota in the pocket. I think a real key is what you're going to see in the secondary. Micah Hyde is week to week after tweaking his groin last week against the Packers in his big homecoming. So you're going to see Raphael Bush back there likely, but he's also dealing with some injuries, shoulder injuries. So you could see rookie Saran Neal. Teron Johnson has been outstanding at that corner nickelback spot. He should be there, but he's also dealing with a shoulder injury. So they're banged up. They signed Dante Johnson this week to help with some depth at the cornerback position, but I think it's going to be interesting. Corey Davis, as you mentioned, coming off a big week. This secondary has to have a big game and keep Marcus Mariota from making big plays.
Yeah, kind of along those lines, and something you alluded to earlier was I think my third key is just for the Titans to keep Josh Allen uncomfortable. I know that was a big thing last week. I think the stat I read was he was 1 for 12, when facing pressure. And the Titans have been good at that this year, and they're going to have to keep that up this week. And I think they should be able to do it just with how effective they've been with rushing the passer. They've got a couple of injury notes. Wesley Woodyard, who has led the team in tackles, is probably questionable for this upcoming week. He left early against the Eagles after actually only 2 plays with a shoulder injury. So that would be a big absence for the Titans. And then safety Kenny Vaccaro dislocated his elbow, so he'll be out this week too. But I think the Titans have enough depth to compensate for that. And just keeping Josh Allen uncomfortable, similarly to the way they did with Wentz last week, I think will be a big factor this week.
Great. Erik, thank you so much for joining us. If you can, real quick, give a shout out. Where can people find your work and on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. On Twitter, I'm at Erik Bacharach. And if you go online to Tennessean.com/sports/Titans, that's where all my stuff is.
Awesome. And it's a good practice for, fans to head over to the opposite team's Beat Guys sites. Check out
Sure.
some of the reaction after the game. And for all your Buffalo Bills content, as always, guys, keep it locked on to nyup.com. And we'll see you at New Era Field on Sunday.